Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Craig Pera, and you are listening to Sex Afflictions and Porn Addictions. And today I have a very, very special guest. I'm going to introduce her, and we're going to get into some really important conversations to help you deepen your connections and keep your relationship alive. In fact, that's the subtitle of her book. With me today, I have Shana James. She is a relationship coach. She's been one for 20 years and humbly discovered the causes of disconnection and distrust in relationships. And for those of you listening, there's a lot of distrust in your relationship. So I think you're going to get a lot of value. She specializes in supporting people over 50s, both dating and in long-term relationships, who want to have the best love and sex of their lives with deeper connection, honest communication, and lasting passion. She is the creator and host of the Practicing Love and Man Alive podcast. She has an awesome TED Talk with thousands men tears reveal about the crisis between men and women in her book that I have right here. Honest Sex, a Passionate Path to Deepen Connection. And keep relationships alive. She also published Power and Pleasure, a man's guide to becoming a confident and satisfied lover and leader. Who doesn't want that? She has a master's in psychology as well as DISC and positive intelligence certifications, decades of authentic relating workshops. And I would like to welcome you to the program. Hello, Shana.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here.
It is an absolute privilege. I met Shana, everyone, at the Big Tent Summit, that conference that we went to, and of people who support men. How did you find yourself, Shana, in the men's space? How did
Yes,
you
well,
how did you get here? 20 years of experience
I
working with
know.
men.
It's so wild. In my 20s, I was part of this intentional community where we were doing authentic relating. We decided we were going to be really real with each other and then stay for whatever the messes or fallouts. And, we did all kinds of crazy things. Like some of it was just being really honest about when we pushed each other away or when we got angry or when someone was turned off or things like that. And, it was all kinds of shenanigans. But anyway, the two of the men who were part of that community felt like they were getting such amazing, they were growing so much and learning so much about themselves. And women were more drawn to them than ever because we were all kind of, single-ish and dating at that time. So they created this workshop called the Authentic Man Program. And part of that program was bringing in a team of women to give men honest and loving feedback. And that just set me, I thought I was going to be a therapist and do more relationship work, but it's similar, right? What I do is similar, but I decided that I wanted to be much more human with people, and especially men. I became more of an ally and someone who men can really learn about women from because I'm willing to be honest about so many things.
Yeah, I loved your book. It was so first of all, it's important, and I'm going to include the link below. And, you pick up a book like this, you think, okay, we're going to be talking about sex, right from the beginning. And it wasn't that. You broke the book. There were three sections: mature honesty, sex as an expression of connection, practical tools. Why is mature honesty so important? And it's not just the blunt truth that we might typically think of. And you advocate for a new definition. And I'd
Yeah.
love to hear more about that.
Yeah, well, I call it mature honesty because I believe in what I've found with my clients and my own relationships is that honesty really is the foundation of keeping passion alive. If we don't know ourselves and we're not sharing about our desires and our fears and our upsets and, this thing is having me feel disconnected from you and this thing is having me feel closer to you, then we don't really know each other. So the honesty that many people bring to their relationships is a little more, like you said, blunt, right? It's like, well, I feel like you're being an asshole. That is not very helpful. While you might feel that way, I would argue that that's a thought, not a feeling. But also, it's way more helpful to say something like, wow, when you said that, my feelings got hurt. Or when you said that, I didn't want to be as close to you anymore. Like now I want to go take a break and move away from you instead of come toward you. Right. And so with that kind of honesty, we really start to know and trust each other more. And that is a basis of passion, happening and staying alive, especially for women, I would say safety. I think it's important for
Safety,
all of us, but safety
all of
is
us.
so important.
And when there has been betrayal, like there has been for so many of my clients,
Yes.
Shayna, if they did the honesty thing, if he did the honesty thing right, we would have issues, but we wouldn't have these issues. Does
Right.
that resonate with you?
Totally. Totally. And I think at times, if we are honest, a relationship ends, right? Or transitions or something. But oftentimes, if we can be honest before we blow something up, right? If we can be honest with a need or a desire, or, you know, I really, I love you, and there is a kind of sex I really want to have, or we're not having sex, very often. Like, can we talk about this? Let's figure this out together, right? People being on the same team and being honest can then, stop those blow ups that happen later down the road.
Well, they suppress, they stuff it down, they don't express their needs don't get met proactively, they get met reactively. And one of the stories I liked in the book um, was the water bottle example. And I thought that was a really good example of a couple arguing about something completely different than what's on the surface layer. So can you tell me more about these surface layer arguments and what's really going
What's
on
really driving them?
underneath?
Yeah, and I learned this a lot through my parents too, where and there's a section in the book, like, it's not about the garbage, the laundry, or even the money, or, all the things. It's like we fight about these surface level things, and underneath what's tends to be going on is I don't feel supported, I don't feel loved, I don't feel understood, I don't feel met. And it's a lot less vulnerable to focus on the laundry, the garbage, the all of that stuff, right? Than it is to really be vulnerable and say, I don't feel loved. I don't feel known. And it's more, it's more vulnerable to put out there our real desires because they could be rejected than it is to just complain or bitch or nag. So I really am a big proponent of vulnerability, and it can feel like you're going to die. There are times where I've sat there and about to say something and I'm like, I feel like I'm going to puke. I'm so nervous. I can't get this out. Right. So I'm not saying it's easy, but what I am saying is that kind of communication creates connection with the right person, right? If your partner happens to be someone who isn't the right person or is not willing to be real and honest with you, then that's another thing.
Now, what do you hear from so here's a personal example, Shayna, that I remember a long time ago. Maybe we had just gotten married. Michelle and I were being intimate, and I had done something. It was the position that made her uncomfortable.
Yep.
That made me uncomfortable.
Yep.
I shut down,
Yes.
like I received that as because of my brokenness. I received that as the ultimate abandonment. And that, among other things, became the justification and the rationale that I would use to justify my behavior, which is completely misplaced. And I'm just stating what is, but putting it out in the open. With your clients who have strayed, who have been dishonest, what reasons do they give you, or what justifications have you heard in your practice?
Yeah, there are so many, right? I'm not being met by my partner. My needs aren't important.
She doesn't respect the hard work, my contributions. I hear that
Yes,
one a lot. She takes for
totally.
granted me working like a savage to, provide.
Yes, that's such an important one because I think so many men I've worked with don't feel appreciated. And right, like you said, it's an affront if a woman wants more of this deep or emotional connection or kind of more loving, tender connection. It can feel like, what, you want that? Like I'm doing so much for you. Why is it that you want something else? And like you said, it's taken me decades to hear someone say, especially in the middle of sex, hey, could you try something different? Or, could you do this in a way, that doesn't really feel good. Like I still feel that zing or that burn inside of me of like, oh God, I'm bad or I'm wrong or I did something wrong. And the more we can just notice, okay, that's happening inside of me. That doesn't actually mean what I think it means, right? This is actually, if we have a growth mindset here, this is me working through and releasing some of that old pain and old wounding as opposed to getting protected, getting defensive, blaming it on my partner, and then, blowing things up or creating something else to create a lot more distance.
And this isn't just for the men, though, is it? Because one of the things you said about your partner is you're not who you think you are, and your partner is not who they think they are.
Who
Can
you
you
think they
elaborate
are. Yeah.
who you think they are? And the theme that came to mind is one of the most important moments in my relationship with Michelle was when we got away from right and wrong.
Mhm.
And when she got away from right and wrong, even though she was right, logistically, or there was great advice,
Yes.
it was an owning that this isn't being received. How can I go about it differently? But what did you mean by that statement? You don't know who you are, and you
Yeah.
don't
You're not who you
that one.
think you are, and neither is your partner, is basically
Thank you.
like, so we have all these stories and we have these assumptions, we have these ideas, we have identities that we take ourselves to be. And so, I might take myself to be this caring, loving woman. And when my partner responds to me as though I'm not that, it can create rage and defensiveness and like, how dare you? And I can't be with you if you don't see me this way. And then vice versa, right? If I have these stories and I think I know my partner, I'm going to and I hold them like in this box, like you don't care about me, you don't understand me, all these things. We then relate to them as though that's true and we continue this dynamic as opposed to the vulnerable part would be, hey, I'm not really feeling understood in this moment. Can we try that again? Right? Everybody, not everybody, but oftentimes in a relationship, especially when we're struggling, we tend to like layer on top of each other assumptions and judgments and analysis and trying to be right. And when we let go of one of us has to be right and one of us has to be wrong, even like you said, even if we know one of us one of us might be right in a certain moment, and the more humble you get, the more we can admit when someone else is right. But if we're trying to get that higher position of I'm right and you're wrong, it just kills the connection.
Yeah, it creates this power dynamic, and typically the profile of the man, Shayna, is my clients, very leaders on the outside, but at home feel completely disempowered. Is
Totally.
that something you see in your work too?
Yes, and I often work with men to find, and I imagine you might do this too. I'm curious, but it's like to find that sovereign self, right? The strength or that inner self-love and the knowing like I am good, I am worthy, because it's relationship is the hardest place to find that and know that, because we're in this dynamic, especially if we're feeling nagged or attacked or not appreciated or not understood, right? It challenges all those old wounds that we've had with our parents and our teachers and all of that. So what I see is that when a man is truly centered in himself and he actually knows that he's an amazing man, there's nothing he then needs to prove or defend. That doesn't mean he can't, stand up for himself and be strong and clear and hey, this doesn't work for me and I'm not going to tolerate this or put up with this, or we need to find a different way here. But it's not coming from a fuck you kind of a place or a you're doing this to me, or there's much more of a how do we figure this out together with curiosity and compassion for each other?
When you think about this moving from conventional honesty to radical honesty, it literally is one of the most difficult things that we're going to do in our lives as people, because the barriers are our trauma, our programming, and everything else that's getting in the way, right?
Yes. And the word radical to me, I don't know, it scares me a little bit. So
Mm,
that's why I
mm.
use mature honesty because,
Mature, mature.
you know,
Yes, yes.
radical honesty, I don't necessarily believe that every single thing needs to be said. And radical honesty to me doesn't, maybe in the book or how they describe it, it's like there's a how you bring it, but if sometimes I think radical honesty inspires a like, I'm just going to say it and it doesn't fucking matter how I say it, right? But to me, it's very important that we actually bring that maturity and that vulnerability as opposed to blaming, shaming, or attacking, which could also be called honesty.
Mature because of the point you made around radical. I have to share every thought. No, you do not.
No, you
And
don't.
nor should you. And that's a terrible dynamic to be stuck in. Yeah, I think my listeners are going to get a lot of value learning about mature communication. Now, what do the water bottle. Tell me about the water
The
bottle, because
water
I think
bottle.
this is a great example of a surface level connection. And I love these simple examples that really illustrate what's going in what clients call Shana. Like they have these, I have them track their triggers and they'll track a dumb trigger. Like I
Yeah.
got upset over the water bottle.
Right.
I'm like, that's not dumb.
Great. No,
That
no,
is
this is good.
this is so good. We're gonna because we can. It's innocent enough. It doesn't have all the baggage of everything else to peel away the layers of the onion. So, give me a summary of
Yeah.
that story and why it was so important for
Okay,
you.
the summary of that story is we were about to go to Burning Man, which is this festival in the desert that's all about survival and, if you're not hydrated, right, you things go bad. I got dehydrated there once and it was not pretty.
Yeah, you can die.
You can die, right? And so my then husband was very focused on he wanted a new water bottle because his didn't have a seal that he trusted and it leaked and whatever. And I was very focused on part of Burning Man is, you don't buy unnecessary shit. We're trying to get away from the corporations and
Consumerism, all that
consumerism and all
stuff.
of that. So
Plastic.
plastics and all, there's tons of plastic in the ocean and it's in our water now and blah, blah, blah. So that was like, we were not mature enough in that moment to say, hey, you're valuing this. I am valuing this. How do we want to solve this? Right. We didn't have to have an answer in that moment, but it was more like, are we willing to look at this together from being on the same team as opposed to from, dueling teams where we're duking it out?
And what was so for you, what were the deeper underlying issues for you and for your partner at the time?
Yeah. So for me, the underlying issue, one was money. I didn't want to spend money. I was trying to save or trying to be more frugal. And the other was the environment and really wanting to not, buy more shit that destroys our world. And for him, it was really more that survival piece, which I can, I've acknowledged looking back. I'm like, okay, that makes so much sense. And maybe we could have come up with a win-win. Maybe we could have borrowed someone else's water bottle that had a seal or maybe, right? I didn't even think of that option until now, 20 something years later. There are all these different possibilities for coming together when we're not attacking each other or thinking that our way is right and we have to fight till the death to make it happen.
And so how can couples learn to see what's under the surface during conflicts? That I feel like I guess I asked a question. I want to preface it as back to this being one of the most challenging and rewarding things that people will do is figuring that out. But what are some practical things that come up
Practical
for you
things,
when
yeah.
you hear
So
that?
one tool that I find incredibly helpful, and then we'll talk about what's, underneath that, but is to really sit down and say, here's what's most vulnerable for me about this, right? We're in the middle of a situation, we're disagreeing, we're having an all out blah, you this, whatever. And it's like, okay, if we can actually pause in my book, I call it the race to vulnerability. So, in a way, whoever gets to vulnerable first wins. Not that you have to focus on winning, but usually it's like, I'm going to win the fight by being more, stronger, protective. This way you win the fight by being actually more vulnerable first. And so just that
I love
simple.
that curveball, by the way. And sorry for the interruption, but if there's a chance, if there's a part of my brain that can anchor into winning
Yes, I
by
win.
being more vulnerable, I will show her I'll teach her a thing or two,
Totally.
and I win.
Woo! Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Right,
Go
and so
on, go
even
on.
just by saying, like, what's vulnerable about this for me is now then we go back to the work that you and I do, right, where we support people to find that place inside where they love themselves and they know that they're good innately and they don't have to prove that because if it's really hard for you to share something vulnerable, we have to get underneath why. Because most times when people say to me, I want to say this, but I don't know if is this the right words? Is this the right way to say it? I'm like, your words are perfect, right? Like there's nothing wrong with your words. Why does it feel hard for you to say? Then we get into some of those deeper things.
Yeah. Relationship patterns learned in childhood, our attachment style, our traumas, all of that stuff is underneath this mature, or it is thwarting mature honesty. It's yeah, yeah, yeah. Good, 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 good. That was really great. The next question I wanted to ask you was you talked about what is the importance of nonviolent communication to you and to your clients?
Well,
And then what
nonviolent
is it?
yeah, nonviolent communication is really about a similar thing that I talk about with mature honesty, which is owning this is what's going on for me. This is a need I have. This is an emotion I'm feeling, right? This is what's happening over here. It's my side of the street. I had a partner once who, I was like, well, maybe you think this and you feel that and blah, blah. And he was like, okay, that's my side of the street. Like, can you go back to your side of the street and tell me, how are you feeling? What do you need? Because oftentimes, if we don't know what we need or feel, we can hide behind, or we just, I don't know, for me, I used to get into that fluster of like the fears about the other person would, spin. And that's what I would focus on. But then if I could come back and say, oh, I need a moment, or I need us to be loving with each other. It's too hard for my nervous system when we walk in the house and we like, we're already at each other. I need us to slow down or any of those things. If we can start to own that, that is where we start to create this upward spiral, and B, we're not going down the downward spiral, which the gravitational pull, right, of the downward spiral of being violent with each other, it's strong. So then we have longer, resentments and just I don't want to because you didn't, and it's hard to get out of that. So if we can either neutralize that or bring it into that vulnerability, then we're not sucked into that black hole.
Which is so important because one of the things that you do is broaden the concept of sex beyond the cultural cliches. And when I think about our programming on issues, if I had to make a list of where historically we've received as a society the worst programming, like the absence of any program, that neglect is produces abuse like results. Um, Tell me more about that.
Okay. So, as I was in my 20s, I was studying Tantra and things that were like more meditative. It was called orgasmic meditation and all kinds of things where I realized I was raised with this idea that sex is intercourse and sex is always, or at least it's always with our genitals, but mostly it's intercourse. And then the goal is like to get to climax. And if we're not getting to that end place, then somehow we're doing something wrong. And I think what I started to see is there are many, many, many ways to have sex. And actually, that's been really helpful for me in this perimenopausal phase. And for many of the listeners, might have a woman in their lives who things start to hurt and they feel different, and penetration isn't always exciting anymore because it can be uncomfortable or even painful. And so when we expand the definition of sex to as two people together, we are going to connect with as much of ourselves as possible in as pleasurable of a way as possible, intimate of a way as possible. And I talk about how sex, I describe like one-dimensional sex versus four-dimensional sex, or I call it fast food sex versus gourmet sex.
Yeah, yeah,
Fast
yeah.
food
Tell me
sex, or
about
that
that.
one-dimensional, is like, okay, we're doing a physical thing here. And then the gourmet or the four-dimensional is this is physical, it's also emotional, it's also energetic, it's also for some people even spiritual. And then we could quadruple that by saying you can actually learn to feel your partner's pleasure in your own body. So you're no longer just feeling your own pleasure, you're actually feeling their pleasure and your pleasure and building on that. And that can all happen by sitting in front of each other and looking into each other's eyes or touching fingertips or kissing, right? Like to me, that is all sex. And when you're not trying to get to this one specific way of experiencing sex, you win a lot more to your point about winning, right? It's like, yeah, and because so many people have this idea of this is what it's supposed to be, and then we lose the pleasure that can happen in all of those moments together.
And it doesn't have to be, a guy hears this and they might think, okay,
Ugh,
are we talking Harlequin, romance novel?
what
Does
the
the
fuck?
dew have to be dripping off the peach at the break of dawn as we're, on the hill? I know it doesn't mean that, but can you unpack that a little bit
I
for,
love what you just said because yes, I can imagine, right? Certain especially men hearing that are just like, "What? Come on." How do I wanna unpack
intimacy is a scary word, as you know, for us guys,
Yes,
right? Like
yes,
intimacy, like some of the clients and even me, his story, like there's this visceral because there's so much around damage,
yes,
around touch and
yes,
connection and being honest, and you hear a word like that. So yeah, no,
yeah.
take it away. Help
Well,
us
okay, so
understand that
as you
better.
say that, I realize my partner and I have created a series of dates where each one of us gets to choose what we want or how we want to, be touched or how we wanna have sex or things like that. It's been so hard for us you know, to say like, "Oh, this is what I want." So it's not easy, but what I will say is one of the dates we had, my partner and I had sex, but also before that, I was just massaging him and loving him and like putting some attention on different parts of his body. And it was sometimes gentle touch or sometimes a little bit more touch that kind of had, more of arousal touch. But he said after the whole thing, he was like, the sex was amazing, but the thing that actually blew me away was I've never felt loved like that. I've
Mm,
never felt cared for like that. And so it's vulnerable. And like you're saying, if you have a history of touch that was abusive or any of those things, right? It could bring up even more than having sex where you kind of get to zone out a little bit or distance a little bit.
yeah.
So, we have to watch out for that and get some support when that happens, like especially from you. But there's just so many different ways to experience pleasure. And I think part of as I get older, it's so helpful because, especially in a woman's body, like I said, it's changing all the time. And there's all kinds of pain and struggles that I've been going through. And if my partner wasn't so loving and supportive and open to like, well, let's try this. It's not about like, let's try something that's second rate or doesn't feel good, right? There are things that we've been able to do or ways that I've been able to create pleasure for him where he's like, holy shit, I never even knew that could happen because the focus has been so much on that, genital intercourse.
Well, and it's that foundation of non-physical intimacy that sets up this
Yeah,
new way of thinking about sex,
totally.
which which demands that vulnerability. It's like you're no longer painting with one brush and one color.
Oh, nice.
You now have a number of different palette, yeah, to choose from around touch. And so, as you know, I was touched as a kid. There's a part of me that's been having some reactions, and because the
Yeah.
priest who oversaw us was arrested for child molestation, and so
Wow.
I've been digging into that recently. And despite being a quote unquote sex addict, one of the things that I realized that I was completely incapable of experiencing, even I could have sex with Michelle,
Yes.
but the notion of it being anything other than a buildup of that of that energy, a
A
release of that
release.
energy was completely foreign. And one of the pieces of advice we got at that low point, and I want to get your thoughts on this, was we literally started touching with clothes on. One time I would rub hands, and if feet were safe, they were for us feet. It was literally the long sleeve shirt, jeans on, lying there, super casual, maybe even the TV's on in the beginning, just to create this casual
Safety.
safety and touching hands, and then forearms, and then biceps, and then shoulders, and then a t-shirt on, and then a pair of shorts on, and building on that was so, so, so important to us. Want to hear your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I'm just so grateful that you share your story, right? And the thought that came out for me was if we're okay with whatever arises from that, then we heal. Like maybe it brings up tears, or maybe it brings up,
It did.
the grief or this anger or frustration, or like if we can actually allow that and be okay with that. And that's one of the things that I think sex is amazing for, when we get to a level where we're not freaking out by the other's emotions or upsets or whatever, then there's healing that happens and we can create a very intentional context. Like, okay, I'm going to touch your hands for the next couple minutes, and if you're willing, right, you could just show me or express or let the tears flow if they come, or maybe you're going to laugh, or maybe you're going to yawn, or maybe you're going to like like, who knows, but trusting that our bodies can start to unwind and release some of these things. And I think there's nothing more sacred than doing it with a partner.
Yeah, I was so blessed that Michelle had that patience and that empathy and commitment to getting results. She became very, very practical after my low point, which forced her to step out of some of her patterns that she was part of.
Yes.
But that laid a foundation, because I remember sitting there with the person I love, the person that I wanted to be with, being so like it was different than times before my rock bottom, because like you said, I can disassociate, I can disconnect, I can think of something else. Like if there was a compartmentalization contest, I
Yes.
think I'd be,
Yeah.
like an influencer. You know what I mean? Like I just did it so, so, so well. And I remember being so uncomfortable, so afraid,
Yeah.
so anxious, but being able to share that without judgment in return, without you shouldn't feel that way, without, it was really that safety that I feel really confident is one of the reasons why we're still going strong, because of that choice.
Yeah. And she's such a gift, right? Because
Yes.
I know the clients you work with too, and to their partners, because she can actually help people see how she did that, especially for the women, like, wow, it can feel, I think, like you're betraying yourself if trust has been broken or something like that has happened, for you to show up with love and compassion and empathy. But she found a way to show up for you in that and also not betray herself, right? Like stay very true to herself.
Yeah. Yeah. It was absolutely, blessed. It's why
Yeah.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
All right. I got a few more questions for you, Shayna, and this is great. So, how do you help clients move through shame into open expression of their desires or fears?
Mm,
This, I like that. I'm afraid of this. This
yeah.
is so hard. Tell me
Yeah.
your,
Well, oftentimes I call it human practice. So oftentimes with clients, I help them by slowing down and, starting to look at like what excites you, what has turned you on in your life. Or sometimes we go, no offense to the pun, through the back door, which is like, what do you not want? What does not turn you on? And then oftentimes what I'll do, especially with men, as a woman, I get to kind of play the stand in. So if they're feeling hesitant or like, oh, I don't know if I could say that out loud, right? We'll slow it down and practice together, and I'll have them say it. And then maybe just pause and feel, like you said, some of those feelings that come up. And then I can guide them through that so that it doesn't, the stakes are a lot lower with me than they are with a partner, right? And there's a lot more, there's, there's anxiety or anxiousness or whatever that can happen saying it to me because I'm a woman, but it's not like, oh, I'm going to lose my relationship if I say this thing. So as we practice and as it becomes more natural and as we sometimes look at like, well, why would that be a bad thing? Why would there be something wrong with you if you did want that? And we go back into some of those old stories and clear that up, then it becomes much more comfortable to bring it to your partner.
I love that technique. I have something similar. I call it scripting, because when they say it, and guys, this is great advice, and you can do this in front of a mirror. If you have something you want to say, practice saying it, because you have been trained and conditioned to get defensive and shut down. You got that down pat. This is a new skill, a new tool, a new language, and new words that you're not used to putting together. So I love that technique. So your TED talk is so powerful. What is the one thing you wish every man heard about his emotional world and how it impacts his relationship? If you had to pick one, and I
One
didn't
thing.
plan this, so I know I'm putting you on the spot, and I'm a
Yeah.
friend, so I feel bad if nothing
Well,
comes
okay,
up.
I'll
But
say
what's the
the
one thing?
one thing that comes up is that vulnerability is human and that most men are shamed out of the just very human things you feel. The fear, the upset, the grief, the all of it, right? The unknown, the uncertainty. But just if you start to really get, oh, this is a part of being human. I am innately good. I am innately lovable, right? Sometimes it takes some work
Mm,
to get there.
yes, it does.
But then I can be vulnerable in front of another person who's attacking my vulnerability and know that it's about them, it's not about me. And it's like, I'm sorry you feel that way, or yes, I can see how you might think I'm weak right now, but actually I know I'm strong and I know I'm a good person and I also know I'm scared in this moment.
And that's why it's so important for men to do the work on themselves. They have to, right? I mean, a lot of guys, they get caught, they jump into couples therapy, and that's, again, I only see the cases
Uh,
where that fails,
yes.
but it fails miserably because each person, if they did some of this foundational work, they'd be coming together in so much of a better place. And it's really almost unfair for the couples counselor it's a lot. It's a big ask, and very few counselors have the skill to be able to fix both in the relationship at the
Right.
same time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
Like that lady on TV who's got that show, who's a master. I forget her name right
Ooh,
now. She's very, very good.
I don't know.
They do that couple. Yeah, they have people, and they do it live, and it's all right. So what? This was the other thing that I thought was really interesting for men working on themselves. How can they balance strength and softness?
Yeah. And you can think of softness however you want to think about it, right? It might be openness, it might be open heartedness, it might be that kind of vulnerability. I think remembering that vulnerability is actually a strength is amazing, right? Because there are men I've worked with who would like, I would jump out of an airplane before I'd, really want to share my vulnerable desires with my partner. And when I think about a man jumping out of an airplane, I'm like, God, that takes a lot of strength or a lot of chutzpah. But when you think that the vulnerability is even scarier to remember, wow, it's actually strong to be able to love myself and stand up for myself and still, show these parts that I'm afraid I'm going to be rejected by or rejected for. So yeah, I think reframing that as vulnerability as a strength is a really powerful move.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of the most powerful. One last thing before we wrap up. Is there anything that and people listening, my list of questions is obscene for Shana. One, because we became friends, her, Michelle, and I, and we've been really diving into her stuff. And so I would love to have you back. And what I like to do is my clients listen to these podcasts and then they follow up with questions. And then, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Love to answer questions.
And I look forward to that. But what's is there anything you want to leave my audience with, Shana? This is so great. So honored to get to know you.
I think what I would like to leave your audience with is, some people stay together, some people separate. I think, right? Ideally, if you can, I think what you support people to do is, right, to weather this storm and stick with it. I want to give the context that if you can see this in terms of growth, whether it's emotional growth, spiritual growth, that everything that's happening is a chance to grow and to learn to love better and to learn to be loved more. And yes, at times we wish it didn't have to happen through so much trauma or so much challenge, but it's another way of maturing, right? When we really like get rid of the fantasies of, oh, it's going to be perfect and it's going to be hot and it's going to be this and it's going to be that. And, and I don't know. So I guess what I'm saying is when you can create the context around this that, okay, this is what's happening. I am going to face the reality and I'm going to do, whatever I can to learn the lessons. I think of it like as a soul curriculum, right? I'm going to learn the lessons that when I'm on my deathbed, I look back and I feel proud of myself because,
Mm.
right, I learned to open my heart, or I learned to be more generous, or I learned to receive love. That's a really big one for men too. Um, yeah, and that to not make yourself wrong, right? Not make You don't have to
Mm.
make your partner wrong, but also if you can let go of making yourself wrong and just realize, all right, this was the hand you were dealt. You did the best you could. And now you actually get to step into being who you're proud to be.
Yeah, that privilege we have of not working 18 hours in a mine, and we can work on ourselves, we can learn and grow from our mistakes and reach out to people like you and
And you.
everybody here's and me. But here's the book. Honest Sex, A Passionate Path to Deepen Connection and Keep Relationships Alive. I'm going to have this in the notes, and I'm also going to have Shana's website uh, and anything else she wants to share with you guys. But just if you're listening and you're not inclined to click below, Shana James Coaching, it's Shana James Coaching, all one word.com. And please, please, please check her out. Shana, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I so look forward to having you back. So thank you, everybody, for listening. It's me, Craig Pera, founder of the Mindful Habit System. Embrace your power of choice and feed the right wolf inside you. Thanks for listening. Make it great. Life is too short to suck. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you.